and good day to everyone. This is Attorney Angel Chona Grace Valera Nunez for our asynchronous class in Statutory Construction. For this recording, we will have a recap of what we have discussed last meeting, particularly on the concept and definition of law, which is the subject matter of construction. Then we'll revisit the classifications and the different types or kinds that we discussed, but focused on public law and private law, and of course the hierarchy of laws, in which we mentioned that the Constitution occupies the top position in the hierarchy of laws, and a new topic on the statutes and the different parts of the statutes. Last week, we defined law in its broadest and strict legal sense. And we said that in its broadest or general sense, it refers to any rule of action or norm of conduct applicable to all kinds of action and to all objects of creation. And it includes all laws, whether they refer to state law, physical law, divine law, and others. And we focused on the definition of law in its strict legal sense as defined by Sanchez-Roman. So, we said that, according to Sanchez-Roman, it is a rule of conduct, just, obligatory, laid down by legitimate authority for common observance and benefit. And from this definition of law in its strict legal sense, we were able to identify its different elements. And we said that it is a rule of conduct, it must be just, it must be obligatory, it must be prescribed by legitimate authority, and it must be ordained for common observance and benefit. Now we also discussed about the different sources of law. The main sources we said are legislation, precedent, and customs. As to classifications, we mentioned that there are different classifications, types, or kinds, such as natural law, positive law, divine law, physical law, moral law, and we focused on public law and private law, and also discussed about substantive law and adjective law. Now, in public law, we also identified its different branches, including international law, constitutional law, criminal law, and administrative law. Whereas in private law, we said that under this, we have family law, obligations and contracts, and many others. As to the hierarchy of laws, we said that the Constitution occupies the top position in the hierarchy of laws, then the statutes, then executive issuances, and then ordinances. We define the Constitution as the written enactment by the direct action of the people, providing for the form of government, and defining the powers of the several departments, thus creating a fundamental law which is absolute and unalterable except by the authority from which it emanated. Its purpose is to prescribe the permanent framework of the system of government and assign to the different departments their respective powers and duties, and to establish certain fixed principles on which government is founded. Now, as to statutes, as we said, these are laws enacted by the legislature, and it must be expressed in a form and must be passed in accordance with the procedures provided by law for its validity. Then we have the executive issuances, which are the acts of the Chief Executive of the Philippines, whether in the exercise of the executive power or broader powers conferred by emergency or at particular periods. And then, of course, the ordinances, which are laws passed by the legislative body of local government units. Now, in our jurisdiction, the prevailing constitution is the 1987 Constitution. Our Republic Acts are our statutes, and this is the current nomenclature. Then we have under executive issuances, we have administrative orders, executive orders, letters of instruction, memorandum orders, memorandum circulars, presidential decrees, presidential proclamations, special orders, and etc. And of course, the ordinances from the different local government units from the provincial, city, municipal, and the barangay. Now we focus on the statutes, which is after the Constitution in the hierarchy of laws. What are statutes? As we mentioned, statutes are laws enacted by the legislature. Now you know that they start as bills submitted to Congress for consideration and approval. And once these bills are approved finally by Congress and then the President, the bill becomes a statute. For the nomenclature, based on history, the nomenclature has changed from public acts to the current nomenclature that we use, which are republic acts. But throughout history, in the different periods of our history, it also was called Commonwealth Act, and then Batas Pambansa, and then PDs during the time of martial law, during the time of Marcos. And now, since we are back to being a republic since the time of the 1986 revolution, we are now back to republic acts. Anyway, you can go back to your history and see how it started from public acts, going to Commonwealth Acts, to republic acts, to Batas Pambansa, to PDs, and then again republic acts. As to kinds, there are different kinds and classifications as well. It may be penal, remedial, substantive, labor, or tax when it comes to the nature of statute. As to application, it can be mandatory or directory. As to performance, it can be permanent or temporary. As to scope, it can be general or special. And as to other classifications, they may be classified as to prospective or retroactive in application, repealing or amendatory, reference or declaratory. Now, as to the different parts of the statute, we have here the official citation. The official citation includes the nomenclature of the statute, as I discussed earlier. And then its number, which is the cardinal, the ordinal, and the nominal number of the statute. So when you say cardinal, we refer to how many statutes have we had or had been passed before this particular statute. So example, Republic Act 11313, or otherwise known as the Safe Spaces Act. We know that prior to Republic Act 11313, there is 11312. Okay? As to the ordinal number, it tells us the order of the particular statute in the list of statutes passed by the legislature. So, pang-ilan siya? Diba? It's 11313. It's the 11,303rd of the Republic Acts. Okay. And the nominal number, which may be considered as a way to identify the statute. So, we identify the Safe Spaces Act as Republic Act 11313. So, again, that is the official citation. Now, next, we have the title. The title is the name by which the statute is known. It gives us a general statement of and calls attention to the subject matter of an act. Now, in the title, we have the long title and the short title. So, in the long title, it contains one subject and generally it describes the statute's purpose and effects. In the short title, which we usually find inside the body of the statute, it is the formal name by which the statute may be cited. Like in my example earlier, Republic Act 11313, The long title is An Act Defining Gender-Based Sexual Harassment in Streets, Public Spaces, Online Workplaces, and Educational or Training Institutions, Providing Protective Measures and Prescribing Penalties Therefore. And then the short title is the Safe Spaces Act, or it is also popularly known as the Bawal Bastos Law. Next, we have the preamble. Okay, so usually the signal for this are the whereas clauses that precede the body of the statute. Okay, it enumerates the aims or objectives of the statute. And also, it declares the policies that guide the legislature in enacting the statute. Now, we don't usually see the preamble anymore, but if you research and find the public acts before and the presidential decrees during the time of Marcos and the executive orders that we have, you will see the preamble in the form of whereas clauses. Now what we have are explanatory notes prior to the body of the statute itself, or you can find the declaration of policy inside the body of the statute. Okay. Now, next, the enacting clause. So the enacting clause is also an important part because it is the part that declares the legislative authority that enacted the statute and gives the statute the force of law. So you can see there, it states, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the Philippines in Congress assembled. And of course, we have the body of the statute. The body is the main body of the statute, and it may be divided into different parts, such as different sections, subsections, epigraph, and paragraph. So, the section gives you the number usually in bold type and written as, for example, section 1. Then, there may be a subsection under section 1. If, for example, there is a subsection of section 1, then you will see it under section 1. Then the epigraph, which is a brief statement of what the section is all about, or it is the heading of each section. For example, section 5, penal provisions. So the epigraph there is the penal provisions. And then the paragraph, of course, which is the association of sentences that gives us the point or the idea of that particular section. Now, there are also other types of clauses that you may find inside the body of a statute, such as the interpretative clause, separability clause, repealing clause, saving clause, and effectivity clause. Interpretative clause. So in the interpretative clause, it states how the statute shall be interpreted in case of ambiguity in any provision thereof. Okay. And in the separability clause, it states that if any provision, part, or portion of that law is held unconstitutional, the provision or parts or portions of that law which are not affected shall remain valid and effective. And then we also have the repealing clause, which is the part of the statute that announces the legislative intent to terminate or revoke another statute. And then the saving clause, on the other hand, restricts a repealing act and preserves existing powers, rights, and pending proceedings from the effects of the repeal. And of course, the effectivity clause, which states when the law will take effect or when the law will become effective. Okay. And also inside the body, of course, you will see there other provisions like penal provisions. It indicates also the agencies tasked to do the IRR or the implementing rules and regulations, etc. Okay, so based on this, I have an additional assignment for everybody. Now, the additional assignments for you to research and study how a bill becomes a law. And make sure that you know Sorry about that, I got cut off. Anyway, as I was saying, we have an additional assignment. I want you to research and study the process of how a bill becomes a law. Please be able also to explain and illustrate that process using a diagram. This is in addition to our assignment that I asked you to choose one statute which is relevant from 2017 to 2022. Okay? Then we will have an exercise when we see each other during our synchronous class. Alright. For any questions, please communicate with your beetle or your assistant beetle so I can coordinate with them, and let's see how we can address these questions. And of course, God bless everyone and stay safe. For those of you who are interested to know where I got these are from several books such as Introduction to Law by Dasil, Statutory Construction by Suarez, and Statutory Construction by Pilares. Again, thank you very much, and glorify God with a grateful heart.